welcome back to my channel. It's Megan, and today I'm sharing with you all of the books that I read in July. This was actually my most quantity reading month, so I have a lot to share with you today. We'll go ahead and start off with the series I started and finished in July. I binge read a few series. The first was the Thousandth Trilogy by Katherine McGee. I only physically owned The Dazzling Heights, but I did want to read the whole series, so I library read the first book, physically read this one, and then library read the third book. So I did read the whole series even though I don't own them all, and that was a really good time. This is a really interesting dystopian novel in that it's almost utopian, and our main characters were following, I believe, 4 or 5 different girls' perspectives, and the very beginning of the book talks about this girl falling off the top of the 1000th floor from the top of the tower, and we are reading through each of these girls' perspectives to try to figure out who that girl might be. The Dazzling Heights is similar in that we are trying to figure out who fell off or who died at the second book, and then the third book we're dealing with the consequences of it all. I really enjoyed the first 2 books. The third one was a little bit lackluster for me, but overall it was a really fun series. Next, I read the Matched Trilogy by Ali Condi, and I really wanted to like these way more than I actually did. These were just not it for me. I was intrigued by the first book, but overall the series just did not go in a direction that I really cared about, unfortunately. In Matched, we are following a young girl who has essentially been told how she's going to live her life. In this society, everyone is determined like what their job will be, who their spouse will be, even to the day they'll die. Everything is decided for them, and there's a little bit of a rebellion going on. There's a love triangle. It's very middle school Megan dystopian-esque. Unfortunately, I did not read this when I was in middle school, so I have no nostalgic ties to it, and therefore it just wasn't my favorite. But I did think that the concept was really cool. Next, I read the There Will Come a Darkness trilogy. I only had the first book, but I did read the 2 sequels in library books. This is following 5 perspectives. We have a prince who's exiled from the throne. We have a murderess who is known as the Pale Hand. We have a young sister who is on her deathbed. We have a priest or religious person of sorts who is torn between his duty and his heart. And we have a gambler who has the power to find anything or anyone. And it is prophesied that one or more of these individuals has the power to end the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it. And therefore, there's a lot that could go wrong. This one definitely has those dark Six of Crows type vibes, and I think it was really fun. I really enjoyed this series, and I highly recommend it for anyone who enjoys like the Gilded Wolves, Six of Crows, Truth Witch, those type of books. It was a little bit hard to follow at times, but overall it was a really fun fantasy read. Next, I will do the books that I don't physically own. First, we have Chosen at Nightfall. This is the final book of the Born at Midnight series, and I could probably do a whole rant review on how this series ended. I was so angry, you guys. It ended so poorly. I'm so upset about it. It like ruined the whole series for me, to be honest, because if you've watched my previous wrap-ups or reviews, you'll see that this series held like this weird place in my heart where it felt nostalgic Wattpad vibes. It's poorly written overall. Like, the ending just completely ruined it. I don't even know how to describe it. Just don't even waste your time, honestly. Next, I read Concrete Rose, which is the prequel to The Hate U Give. I really liked this one, and learning more about Maverick's backstory and how he raised 7 and those type of things that were happening. I think it gave a really great perspective and made me appreciate The Hate U Give even more. And then finally I read The Cousins, which is by Karen and McManus, and that is the same author that wrote One of Us is Lying. I feel like this author has a habit of writing fairly predictable stories. I don't know if it's just because it's the YA genre or not, but overall I'm fairly underwhelmed by most of her thrillers. I will say this one did surprise me a little bit with the twist. I wasn't fully expecting it, so it got me a little bit. It felt predictable overall. So that is my thoughts on those three. Next is a book that I continued the series for, and that is Kingdom Keepers 2. This one we are focusing our attention at Animal Kingdom, where the villains are currently trying to overtake. That was super exciting for me because if you don't know, I used to work at Disney World, and specifically Animal Kingdom was my home park. Dinosaur the Ride is the ride I helped operate, and it mentions Dinosaur the Ride in here, so it was just really interesting to see how my life experience and perspective was translated into a novel. I do wish I had read this series when I was younger though. I feel like I would enjoy it 100% more. It does feel a tad bit too young for my tastes, but overall it's pretty fun. Next are some standalones that I read. First we have Spell Hacker by M.K. England, One Last Heist, Famous Last Words. This is a story in which we are following this band of misfits, shocker, and they are a team that performs heists. However, they're in the very beginning of the book on their last heist, and after this heist the team is going to split up and go their own ways. Some are going to college, some are moving away for jobs, so on and so forth, except for our main character, who is stuck where she is and just kind of in this rut. And she is so upset about everyone leaving her and ends up accepting a job for one more heist, and so we're following that last heist. Overall, it was pretty fun, but it wasn't my favorite book of all time. Next, I read Relativity by Kristen Bashara. This is actually my coworker's cousin who wrote this, so that was super interesting. This author also wrote Vial of Tears, which I'm excited to pick up because that's a YA fantasy, much more my speed than this one necessarily was. This is a contemporary in which we are following Ruby, who was kind of torn from her comfortable Californian life and brought to Ohio to live with her dad's new wife, and so essentially her stepmom and her stepsister, who happens to be a big meanie. And in this we are watching her just kind of live this mundane nightmare life. So she decides to spend her time doing scientific experiments on the strange oak tree across the cornfield. And in these experiments she discovers that the oak tree is actually a portal to other dimensions and other multiverses, and she is in search of the perfect universe. One where her mother, her brother, her dogs are still alive. One where her father actually pays attention to her. One where her best friend George is more than her friend. However, along the way she also discovers that maybe the perfect life is the one you're already living after all. So I thought this one was really fun. Time travel slash multiverse tropes aren't necessarily my favorite in books. I feel like they're done poorly a lot of the time, but I do think that the way this one was written was fairly well done. There was consistency through the universes, which is a big thing for me. If an injury happens in one universe, the injury stays within the next universe. The person is still the same whether they're going through multiple universes or not. And there was also the perspective of if I change this universe, I'm actually going to be hurting the people I love from this universe, even though I'm from another universe, that sort of thing. So I think this one was done fairly well. Next up, we have Emergency Contact by Mary H.K. Choi. This is following a girl and a guy who have this awkward encounter where the guy, I think he was drunk on a riverbank or something, and the girl got nervous and found out that he was actually just having a panic attack, and so they swapped numbers and became each other's emergency contact, and they just made this pact that they would reach out when they needed support or someone to talk to, and ended up becoming really good friends, and then ended up becoming more than friends. So this was a really cute little read. Next, I read Permanent Record by Mary H.K. Choi. I was on a Mary H.K. Choi binge this month. This one is following a young man who works at a pagoda, or Badoga. I forget what it's called. But essentially he dropped out of college because he couldn't figure out what major he wanted to go for. And he's working at this small convenience type store in order to raise money to pay back all of his loans and figure out his next steps in life. One night a celebrity happens to walk in. He doesn't realize she's a celebrity. They strike up a friendship and she returns another night and they end up falling in love and going on dates and everything. And this one was really interesting because it goes and navigates the elements of like long distance relationships and what it means to truly date a celebrity and those aspects, but it also touches on like financial issues and figuring out your motivation and ambition and goals. And I feel like I really liked this one because I related to both of the characters. They were very endearing in their own ways. I feel like I've been both of them at different points in my life, so I really enjoyed this one. Next, I read The Matchmakers List by Sonia Lawley. This is a standalone novel following a girl whose very traditional grandmother is determined to have her married off by the time she's 30. Unfortunately for Rena, she is 29 and hopelessly in love with her ex who she can no longer have. So every time she goes on a date she finds something wrong with the guy and it just never works out in her favor. But what I really like about this one is that it goes beyond just the romance. It talks about how you can hurt your friends and how to maintain good friendships. It talks about family struggles. It talks about like coming out in a traditional conservative community. It talks about so many things beyond just this matchmaking, but the matchmaking and romance are also a lot of fun. So this one just has it all and I highly recommend reading it. Next I read You Had Me At Ola, which is a first book in a companion series. This is by Alexis Daria. In this we are following Jasmine, who is a leading soap opera lady, and she is about to star in her very first leading role as Carmen, and she has already acquainted herself with her leading co-star until one day he breaks his leg and someone has to substitute in. And that someone that substitutes in just so happens to be her like soap opera crush, or like someone well known within the soap opera world. And he actually has a young son that he's trying to keep hidden from the world, so he's very reserved, very like put off-ish, and she's just struggling to connect with him and it affects their scenes. So they slowly form a friendship and then a romance, and it's just such a good book. I highly recommend this one as well. Finally, I have my graphic novels here. I read 8 volumes of the Olympians graphic novels by George O'Connor. So the first 8 novels are Zeus, Athena, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, Aphrodite, Ares, and Apollo. Each of them tells their own story as well as other stories within it. For example, Athena talks about Theseus and Medusa, Poseidon talks about the Minotaur, Ares talks about Achilles, Aphrodite talks about starting the Trojan War, Apollo just talks about all of his romances. So overall, these are a really fun series, and I really like the way they depict the Greek gods and goddesses overall. There's some issues with it I found, but I don't think there's ever a perfect Greek retelling because there's just so many versions out there. But those are all the books that I read in July. Again, it was my biggest quantity of books of reading. I think that the 8 volumes of graphic novels definitely helped. Even still, I did fairly well, I think. So let me know what you guys read in July down below, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye, friends.